seems our countdown's gone wrong again, but never mind, that's life, isn't it? Welcome to another exciting show. Now, imagine walking down a dark alley in London's East End, often at night. There in the distance, a shadow. Who is it? What is it? A drunk behind a bush, about to do a wee-wee? Is it a Jehovah's Witness on the night shift? And if it's 1880s London, is it Jack the Ripper? But if it's 2021, it's probably Brian Rose doing late night electioneering for becoming the mayor of London. Let's hope not. We're talking about Jack the Ripper tonight, and my guest tonight is John Hamer. And this is interesting because I don't know what research he's done on this, so I'm as much in the dark as everybody else. So welcome, John. I think it's going to be a real good one tonight, isn't it?
Hi, Chris. I hope so. No pressure then, of course.
No, I think every program we've done has been a good one because we've had some really good responses back. And the old audience figures are really shooting up. So we're now megastars. So, when you walk around, sign autographs and all that. We've got a lot in chat already. So far away, John. I'll have my sup of water and I'm all ears.
Yeah, well, when I told everyone what the topic was going to be, I didn't tell everyone, I told some people what the topic was going to be tonight, they thought I was actually talking about the Yorkshire Ripper in the 1980s, not Jack the Ripper in the 1880s. But of course, I had to put them straight. But of course, it's worth re-emphasising that it is the original Jack the Ripper in London in the 1880s and not the Yorkshire Ripper in the 1970s and 1980s. So just to put the record straight. So we know where we are right from the off and there's no confusion. Right, well, as I say, the story begins in the 1880s in London. Most people know the Jack the Ripper story, or think that they know what the Jack the Ripper story was. But believe me, when you finish listening to this broadcast tonight, you'll have a very, very different perspective on it all. And it's absolutely fascinating. Even though I say it myself, it is an absolutely fascinating story. And it's not at all as you imagine it may be. Now, there were 5 victims, and they were in order: Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly. And there is a whole cast of characters which we'll introduce as we go along, and we'll just let the story develop from there. So as I say, it's the late 1880s now. Cast your mind back to then. The gaslit streets of London. As Chris said there about the darkness in a dark alley and all that sort of stuff. You can imagine how dark and dismal it must have been in the streets of London in those days. I mean, it's pretty dark and dismal these days, but I mean, in the 1880s, it would have been a whole lot worse. Okay, so the story actually centers around a gentleman who was one of the heirs to the throne. In fact, he was the eldest son of King Edward VII. Now, this is obviously 1880, so Victoria was still on the throne. So the King Edward VII wasn't King Edward VII at this point. But this gentleman that we're talking about, who was known colloquially as Prince Eddie, was the grandson of Queen Victoria. And as I say, the eldest son of the man who will become King Edward VII. So Eddie would have been the king after Edward VII rather than George V. George V was his younger brother. Okay, just to put that into perspective. Now, Eddie was an interesting character. He was of below average intelligence and partially deaf, and I speculate that was due to generations of royal inbreeding, because a lot of royals over the years and decades suffer from kind of mental and physical defects, but of course they get covered up and they get pushed away into mental homes and the like. But Eddie was a he was a frequent visitor to a paedophile brothel. In other words, much the same as today. This is what goes on today in those circles. He was a customer at a paedophile brothel, and he actually fell in love with a young man there. Now, he indiscreetly wrote several love letters, which came to the attention of his family. And so they tried to lock him away, but he kept escaping. And eventually he was totally shunned by them. And as a result of that, he went a little bit crazy. And not only was a homosexual paedophile, but he was also capable of heterosexual relationships as well. Now, he met a young girl, Annie Crook, she was called, and she was introduced to him by a man by the name of Walter Sickert, who was an art tutor. Now, the royal family thought, "Ooh, wouldn't it be great if we could somehow calm him down? So we'll get this famous artist of the day, Walter Sickert, to give him art lessons." Now, Walter was a bit of a lad himself. He frequented very dodgy places in London, and he actually, in fact, he made Eddie worse. He didn't cure him of his errant ways. He actually made him worse, and he introduced Annie Crook to Eddie. And to cut a long story short, Eddie made Annie pregnant. Now, Annie. So this is not going down well, as you can imagine, at this point in time. Now, Annie was a Roman Catholic as well. And then it turns out, a few months later, that Eddie had sloped off and married her in secret, which you can imagine the response to that. Well, it wasn't very good. So, in fact, the royals were absolutely enraged. So they locked Walter up again. They locked Eddie up again and told him that he wouldn't see Walter again. But Walter was kind of working on Eddie's behalf, and he looked after Annie, who was pregnant and had the baby, and Annie actually gave the baby to Walter Sickert for safekeeping, and he fled to France with the baby. Okay, we'll come back to the baby shortly. But are you all following it so far?
Could I just recap on something? Now, this Walter chappie, I got a little bit lost there.
Right.
Walter Sickert, he was the royal artist, was he? Or was he the
royal? He was an artist. He was a famous artist of the day that the royal family employed to try and get Eddie out of trouble. Yeah. But it actually had the opposite effect, and Walter showed him all the bohemian life of London, in effect, introduced him to this girl who was a part-time prostitute. And he got her pregnant and married her, which was a little bit of a shock.
Yes, because I know that his father, they called him Dirty Bertie, didn't they? That's
his
nickname, Dirty Bertie. That's another thing.
It's a whole other story.
This is fascinating.
Yeah. Do you want to go to chat? I see you're building up in there.
Why not? Let's have a go and chat. We've got here. Very good, Louise. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a good evening. No lines again. Yes, that's right. No lines. I've actually put in star pupil. I do hope the check is on the way. I want the apple for the teacher. That's the first laugh out loud normally. The disruptive one. We got Ralph in chat. Here we go. We've got Angela. Hello, Angela.
Hi, Angela.
And we've got Louise, the Queen's physician or the Prince?
Prince. Queen's physician or the Prince?
Prince Eddie. We got Prince Eddie.
Oh, the Queen's physician comes patiently.
He comes in later, doesn't he? I think.
The Queen's physician comes in later. Don't worry, we're getting there.
And we got old Stewie. Oh, he always comes up. That's Clarence. There we go. And we've got Pimlico Fox. Good evening, Chris, John, and all. Hello. And we got Emin, and I can't, sorry, mate, I can't, Sudama. Hello. Now,
Hi, Alan.
I've got a little thing later on, but I don't want to spoil the story about Edward and Mrs. Simpson, because it seems that Edward was a little similar to Prince Eddie. But
Well,
I don't want to spoil the story at this stage.
yeah, he um, he actually comes into the story later as well.
Really?
Edward.
Okay. I'll back off then. So
All
I'll
right.
wait till
Well,
a little bit
let's
later.
continue. Okay. So where were we? Yeah. So Walter had taken the baby and fled to France for safekeeping because he was scared of what the royals might do to the baby. Quite rightly so. Okay. So, but what happened was the royals reacted to this by putting a cover-up operation in place. As I said, they confined Eddie to house arrest, and they shipped poor little Annie off to hospital, where she was lobotomized by Sir William Gull, who was the Queen's physician. Okay, and this was obviously designed to keep her quiet. And poor Annie actually lived for the rest of her life in a mental institution as a result of that, and she died in Chelsea workhouse in 1919, I believe.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I'm sorry to cut in here, but
No, it's okay.
my father in the 1930s, one of his first jobs before the war, he was a delivery boy for Samuel Jones, the gummed paper people in South London. And they used to deliver gummed paper here, there and everywhere.
Right.
And the chap who drove him around, very nice gentleman, he was in the First World War, and he was a bit like a father figure to my dad, because my dad's father was totally blind. And he delivered gummed paper to a place in South London. And I can't, if only my dad was alive, I could ask him. I don't think it was Natsbury, but Natsbury keeps coming to mind. So I don't know. But apparently it was where all the royals, when they had their children that are a bit sort of, because of the close cousins marrying, they put them into this special mental asylum in South London that I don't fully know the name of. I don't think it's Natsbury, but it just keeps coming to, what I mean? It just comes to mind. It might be, but I don't think it is.
Wasn't it in Surrey? Earl something. Oh,
No.
yeah. Because the
apparently
mother had two cousins that were put there, and they never opened the door and they never acknowledged them. Yeah, and they died in. Yeah.
The locals knew it, but my dad used to go in the reception, as you can go right inside, and I don't know whether he heard the sort of people going in the background, but he used to go in, get the papers signed before I walked out. And all the locals knew it as where the royals sent all their, shall we say, offsprings, and because the royals have got nothing else, a lot of them in those days had little else to do than, shall we say, having close relations with people. I think I've put that.
Was it Earlsfield? That rings a bell. I might be wrong.
If it was in Surrey, it'd have been. You said South London, so
yeah. Okay.
That came from South London. It came from Camberwell, so
right.
Who knows? But anyway, sorry to cut in there.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So as I said, the royals reacted by putting this operation together. Confining Eddie to house arrest and shipping Annie off to hospital, where she was lobotomized and spent the rest of her days in a mental home. But unfortunately, there were a group of Annie's friends who decided to blackmail the royal family, which, as you can imagine, is not a particularly sensible thing to do. They weren't the brightest lamps in the street, obviously, but they thought it might be a great idea to extort some money out of the royal family by threatening to go to the press with it if they didn't get money in return. Now, these ladies were all friends of Annie Crook. They worked with her. Annie used to work in a tobacconist shop at Tottenham Court Road, I think it was. And these girls used to work with her, and they were all part-time prostitutes as well, which obviously we know that from the official chapter of the story. Okay, so rather than submit to their demands, as you would expect of the royal family, they put a plan in place, and not a lot of people know this. That's my best Michael Caine impression, but there is a Masonic lodge at Kensington Palace. It's actually based at Kensington Palace, and it's where all the members of the royal family are members of. Okay,
Really?
so and that's called the Royal Alpha Lodge in Kensington Palace. So the Royal Alpha Lodge members got together and decided to perform a hunt and kill Masonic ritual to dispose of Mary Kelly, who was the ringleader of these ladies, and her 3 friends. And note, it was only 3. Okay, so it was Mary Kelly plus 3, even though there were 5 murders, and I'll come on to that in a minute. Okay, now, the members of this lodge who decided to do this were Sir William Gull, who, as mentioned, was the physician to Queen Victoria, a gentleman by the name of J.K. Stephen, who was Eddie's tutor at Cambridge University, a gentleman by the name of Sir Charles Warren, who was the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, a guy who they recruited who wasn't actually a Freemason, but they recruited this guy as a coach driver, and he was called John Netley. But the guy who did all the planning and carrying it out was a gentleman by the name of, and everyone will have heard this name, it was Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill, who was at that time was father of Winston Churchill and Chancellor of the Exchequer, no less. So those 5 guys set about this hunt and kill operation to silence these girls who were blackmailing the royal family.
Wow.
Wow, indeed.
It's logical, isn't it? It's all very logical.
My research tells me that this is absolutely true. This is not just some fantasy. This is actually how it happened, and I'll come on to the proof of that later. But for the moment, we'll just carry on. You just interrupt me when you want to go to chat or anything, Chris, or to chat.
We'll show a little break now because we've got a lot of people in chat. I'm finding this fascinating story. So, but we got
not even started yet. Whoa.
We've got. This is really incredible. We got here Robert Birtle. Hello, Robert. Good evening, Chris and John. The 1979 movie Murder by Decree. A lot of truth in that film. I've
not aware of that.
What it's about.
There is another movie that does cover a lot of this stuff, although it sanitizes it quite a bit, and that's called From Hell, which some people might have seen. But that's one of those where it kind of revelation of the method, if you like. But yeah,
we got Sean. Oh, sorry, we've got B. I'm terribly sorry, DJ B2. I missed you out. Evening, chaps and chapettes. And then we've got Sean Hamer. No relation there.
Yeah.
And we've got here Pimlico Fox. Oh, thanks, mate. Was it? Do you know something? You've lodged something in my memory. Was it Nesborough or something like that?
I don't know.
Yeah, I've got a feeling it might have been something like that, Nesborough. I'm sure my dad said something like that. If only he was alive now, he would tell me. That does ring a bell, mate. Thank you so much. Thank you. And then we got here John Birdle. Good evening to friends of the truth and liberty from across the Atlantic.
Hi, John.
Oh, we're going across the world. Hello, John. And that is John Basinglone. I hope I got your surname correct. And we've got Magic J. Evening all. Evening. Now we've got a question for you. Rob Random, is John Hamer ex-military?
Absolutely not. No.
Neither am I. We're not Masons either. Right, Louis Wilcox, murder most horrid. What they can't change or buy off they kill. You're spot on there, because this is every program with John's good, isn't it? Angela, crikey, just shows we know nothing. We know nothing.
Yeah.
Sorry, a little bit from 40 Towers there. DJ Beto, From Hell is a good movie.
Yeah, it is. It's a good movie, DJ, but it doesn't go as far as I go. Obviously they can't do that because, the basics of it is in From Hell, but it's not all the details, but it's a very good representation.
So let's recap. So we've now got
I
the
know it gets
poor
a bit
girl who
complicated.
got
I'm sorry
pregnant
about
by Eddie.
Yeah.
Is in is lobotomized and shoved in a lunatic asylum, as they called them in those days.
Indeed.
We've got the Palace Masonic Lodge, which I did not know about. I really did not know.
Still exists, Chris. Still exists, the Royal Alpha Lodge.
Is it actually in the palace itself
It is
or down?
actually in the palace itself, yes.
Wow, I didn't know that. I've learned something there. So we've got these 5 people have been recruited. One of them is the cab driver. I assume it's a hansom cab or something like that.
Yes, it was a hansom cab.
And these
No,
4
it was
other
actually
people.
a coach. I beg your pardon. Well, hansom cabs were just like 2-seaters, weren't they? Two
That's
wheels,
right, yeah.
2-seaters. No, it was an actual coach. It was a coach driver, really. Yeah.
Okay, coach driver.
Yeah.
Then we've got these 4 people, including Chief of Police, Queen's physician, Winston Churchill, and a bloke whose name I can't remember.
Randolph
So I hope we
Churchill.
capped a little bit there. I hope I've helped a little bit there. So, right, this is interesting, and we've got a lot more people in chat warming up, so we have to go to chat a little bit later. But
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I hope we don't mind me recapping, but it's quite a complex story, isn't it?
It is quite a complex story, and I think it's good to recap, yeah, without a doubt. So yeah, they decide to perform this hunt and kill Masonic ritual to dispose of Mary Kelly and her 3 friends, even though there were 5 murder victims. It's important to remember that it was Mary Kelly plus 3 friends. And so one by one, as the girls are found, they were ritualistically murdered, beginning in, I believe it was September 1888, with Mary Ann Nichols, followed by Annie Chapman a few weeks later, then Elizabeth Stride, then Catherine Eddowes, who was actually killed in error because she was mistaken for Mary Kelly, who was the ringleader and the 5th victim. Okay, but we'll come on to Catherine Eddowes and how and why she was killed in error in a little while. Okay. So one by one, as they find the girls, they are ritualistically murdered in the coach. It was William Gull's coach. William Gull was the physician to Queen Victoria. It was his own coach. And this explains why one of the mysteries of the Jack the Ripper thing, and subject to lots of speculation, is why was there no blood anywhere on the pavement where these poor mutilated girls were found? And the reason was that they were killed in the coach, and then just the bodies, once the kind of most of the blood had gone, were just dumped on the pavement. Okay, so that's why that was the case. There was virtually no blood at all where the bodies were dumped. And even more strikingly, all the bodies after they were murdered, they were deliberately arranged in accordance with Masonic ritual. This is a fact. This is not speculation. This is a fact, and the police knew it. The police absolutely knew it. But of course, the one of the ringleaders was the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, who was what was his name? Sir Charles Warren. He was the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, so he was instrumental in conducting the cover-up operation. And if the guy who's the head of the police force is involved, the chances of it being solved, if they don't want it to be solved, are going to be nil, aren't they? Let's face it. Okay.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah. So the Masonic ritual was, for those who are aware of Masonic legend, there is a Masonic legend which is like where the Freemasonic rituals come from originally. A guy called Hiram Abiff, who was murdered in Solomon's Temple, and his body was mutilated in the legend in exactly the same way that the girl's body was mutilated. So we know that it's Masonic, even though it was all denied and all the rest of it as they do. And most of the police were Masons anyway, as they still are, so they must have known it. It's not like, oh dear, what a botch it were made in the investigation. It was just a total cover-up from beginning to end. But Catherine Eddowes, for those people who are a little bit squeamish, if you want to turn the sound off for a minute while I explain to you how the bodies were found. It was their throats were cut across from left to right, okay, and all the blood was drained out of them. Then they were opened up and their intestines draped over their left shoulders. Okay, so it's a bit gruesome, but that is the Masonic ritual that took place. And that is exactly how Hiram Abiff was murdered in that Masonic legend in Solomon's Temple. So Catherine Eddowes, who was the fourth victim, was actually killed in error. She was mistaken for Mary Kelly because at that point in time, they killed the first three. Mary Kelly was the final one, and they were still looking for her, and they thought they found her, but Mary was in hiding by this time because obviously she knew that her three mates had been done in. So Mary was actually in hiding, and she didn't come out of her lodgings very often. So they found this girl, Catherine Eddowes, who someone had told her that she was Mary Kelly because Catherine actually lived with a man by the name of John Kelly, and she actually used his surname. So she was mistakenly marked as being Mary Kelly, but obviously she wasn't. Anyway, the legend, they thought at that point in time, once Catherine was killed, they thought they'd killed the whole lot of them. They thought they got the fourth one, which was Mary Kelly. And Catherine's was a little bit different. Catherine's murder was a little bit different. She was murdered in, oh gosh, my memory. What's the name of the? There's a square in London that's got a Masonic lodge in it, and it's called something like.
Oh, yeah, I used to work near there, believe it or not. Even though I'm
I can't remember what the square's called, but it's a really
hang on,
Masonic
it's
name.
near Longacre, isn't it?
I don't know.
There's a place near Longacre which is the Masonic head office.
Yeah.
So it's Longacre.
Anyway, she was murdered in this, obviously planned. Well, she was murdered in the coach, but she was dumped in that square, which has a Masonic name, which absolutely escapes me. I do apologise.
I can't help you there. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Somebody in chat might know, but they thought they got them all now, so they scrawled a legend on the wall above her body, and the legend read, "The Jews are the men who will not be blamed for nothing." Okay, double negative. That's
in chalk, wasn't it? It's chalked on the wall.
It was chalked on the wall. Yeah, it said the Jews, not JEWS, JUWES. Okay. Now, what the Jews with a JUWES refers to is the three murderers of Hiram Abiff, who were Jubela, Jubalum, and Jubelo. Okay, they were then known colloquially as the three Jews, spelled JUWES. So the legend said, "The Jews are the men who will not be blamed for nothing." I don't understand the logic behind that sentence, but that's what it said. But of course, Sir Charles Warren appeared on the scene very, very quickly. Police commissioner, of course, is going to appear on a murder scene, isn't he? Yeah. And he ordered them to wash that legend off immediately, which they did. But there was a detective who was in charge of the investigation called Frederick Aberline, and Frederick Aberline was being thwarted at every turn by these people. And he was absolutely incensed that they washed off this legend because he wanted to examine it and get forensic handwriting specialists and everything to analyze it and try and understand what it meant and check the handwriting and all that good stuff. But they washed it off immediately, so they couldn't. That was obviously a big clue, but they weren't allowing that to stand. So anyway. So they murdered Catherine by error, and for a short time they actually thought that they'd completed their task, hence that final Masonic message. But then, I don't know how this happened, but they realised that they'd killed the wrong person. So they then panicked and went after Mary again. They redoubled their efforts to find Mary, and actually, because she was hiding, they couldn't kill her in the coach without creating a disturbance. They'd have had to drag her out of her lodgings. So they actually murdered her in situ in her lodgings. And there is actually a very gory photograph, albeit very grainy, of Mary's absolutely desecrated body lying on the bed in her lodgings. But I don't think that would be appropriate to show that. But it is pretty gruesome.
Mm.
So they had to hurriedly kill her in her own lodgings. They couldn't do anything else. So that was, you know, a different slant to the thing as well. So now that all 5 are dead, okay, and Frederick Aberline eventually, and I'm talking very shortly after all this, he resigned. He resigned from the police altogether because he was so incensed about how the case had been handled. And it, you know, eventually, after only a few weeks, it was declared closed by Scotland Yard. No more clues, nothing. You know, so that.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, we're getting to the meat of it now. But if you want to break for a chat.
Well, yes, certainly, and some clever characters. We've got fantastic people in chat. We really, I feel really honoured to have such great people in chat. So I hope don't think I'm crawling here by saying this, but really have. Now we've got a hell of a lot. So please don't. We've got somebody who's actually got that square. I won't mention what the square is. That's embarrassing. Yeah. I work around the corner to that square as well. Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Now we got here. We've got a lot in chat. Excuse me, I'm just trying to go back to where we were before. We've got Rob Brandon. I want to know whether he's in the military. He wears his watch face on the inside, a trait of military. Do you? So that's what
it is. I'll tell you what it is for anybody who's interested. It's just so loose, the strap. It just carries on going round and round like that. So there's nothing sinister about that at all.
Yeah. Okay. And we got here. Re the Royals. I also wondered if it was the Royal Earlswood. Sorry, that was where the lunatic asylum.
That's what I was thinking of. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
We've got Aunt Sally. This is fascinating. Louise Wilcox. Hello, Louise. Or were they taken to the Masonic Lodge? Oh, this is an interesting one. Masonic Lodge at Kensington Palace for the ritual.
Well, now, I wouldn't rule it out, Louise. It's a good point. Yeah, I don't know. But as far as I understood it from my research, they were actually killed in the coach. But yeah, you could be right.
That's a point. Mind you, a hell of a lot of... I mean, the one I heard was they were taken to Epping Forest, which wasn't that far from the East End in those days. I don't know. Let's play Find the Truth. This is Sean. In anything official ever that was ever recorded. Whoops, game over. There's none. It's all eyes. Spot on there, mate. We've got Rob Random. We've got, do you think the Ripper was acting revenge on ladies of the night as he caught STDs? That used to be something to do with telephones, didn't it? Sorry. Sexually transmitted diseases from them. That's what the official story.
No, not at all. Absolutely not. Sorry, no.
No. Then we got here. What we got? Oops. Come on you come. There we are. Louis said he was the mason that built the pyramid, wasn't he?
I don't know, Louis. If you say so, yeah. I mean, he could well be.
Says a lot of Masonic rituals are about Hiram.
Hiram. Yeah.
I live in a place with a lot of Masons. I worked in a profession that had a lot of Masons in it as well. Okay. About the Masonic handshakes. Well, I had a couple of Masonic handshakes because I thought I was a Mason. I was probably scratched my nose or scratched my bum at the wrong time. And I thought it was a Masonic sign. I wasn't, never have been. Paul Craven, a great book is Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare by Michael A. Hoffman, the second. He goes into the occult links with serial killers. That's interesting because there's a little bit I'd like to add about, I don't want to go off the subject, about the Yorkshire Ripper, but we won't talk about that just yet. Sean is, the oath swearers are our sworn enemies. Fact. Yeah, got a point there. DJB2, most of them have not read Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teaching of all ages. Not a bad book. Get the 800+ page version. Never heard of it. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've not read it. Yeah.
We've got Louise. Hello, Louise. Again, we all know the royals are bloodsuckers. Queen and children descends from Vlad the Impaler, and Charles owns Dracula's castle. Sorry for the detour. Prince Charles, big ears, you mean? Sean Smithfield. I suppose you're thinking about the Masonic place. I think there is one there, but this is the one.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that one. It was that one. It might
it's Mitre Square, and it's not far from. I think it's around the corner to Longacre, if my memory serves me correct.
I don't really know the geography of London.
And we got Aunt Sally, Charterhouse Square.
No, it was Mitre Square, but thanks, Aunt Sally. And
then we got a one in Great Queen Street. Yes, that's right. And we've got here, AKA the Three Unworthy Craftsmen. That's from Emmon.
Yes.
And then we got a few more to go. DJ B2, the local worshipful master lends me Velikovsky's books. Laugh out loud.
Okay.
Interesting. And then we got here. That's it. It's gone there. Pimlico Fox. Chris, another hospital your father may have gone is the Royal Maudsley Hospital. No, it wasn't that one. I know that for a fact. But thank you very much for the suggestion. Trying to help. It is much appreciated. Now we got here RSD STDs and other psyops. You never know. I think we had STDs. The GPO used to have it on their telephones. Is it standard telephones? Something like that. Sean, make us scared of our bodies and others' bodies. It's an interesting one, isn't it? From Sean.
Yeah.
And we've got here Louise Wilcox. So this is Emmon talking to Louise. In the legend, he built King Solomon's temple, but some Masons think that really was the pyramid.
Yeah.
Or one of them. To Giza. And then we've got here Paul. We've got here Emmon, the Three Unworthy Craftsmen, Jubilee.
Jubilo and Jubilum, yeah.
Yep, that's it. And we got here Alexander. This is Emmon again. Alexander Wall, Siberian War's son, is probably a Mason. He's got some good videos on sacred geometry. Yeah, I think I've seen a video on was it Washington DC or something? That's supposed to be sacred. I don't think they're all bad. No, I've actually worked with Masons. Are very nice people. Depends on what level, really, because the lower level is really Boy Scouts, isn't it? Really, I believe. Wikipedia, oh, I know Wikipedia says it was the only one of the murders that happened inside the city of London square mile. Interesting, because the East End is just around the corner from the square mile, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then we got here, I knew a Mason and he just had an ordinary job, but I know there are conspiratorial ones. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
It's not so much that. It's more that, the lower levels of Masons are just ordinary guys who think that they're going to gain some kind of financial advantage by networking with each other. It's the ones once you get above the third degrees that start to become more and more sinister.
Spot on.
I actually, 33rd degree.
I work with a couple of Masons, very nice people. I've got a neighbour who's a Freemason, very nice person. Well, Fushi, I can never mention this bloke's name, had something to do with the AIDS in the 1980s.
Yeah, he was responsible for promulgating that myth as well. Yeah.
Washington DC's layout is all Masonic gematria.
It is. It's all the streets of Washington are in the shape of an owl, which is a Masonic symbol.
That's right. So there we are.
I've got quite a bit to cover yet, believe it or not.
Okay, I'll let you press on them. Sorry about that. We had quite a lot.
Fine, absolutely fine.
Please carry on.
I've forgotten where we were up to now. Oh yeah, so Frederick Aberline had mysteriously resigned. Not mysteriously, he just resigned when he was absolutely incensed that the Ripper case was closed. Completely without any serious investigation being done. But obviously we know why that is. So Eddie, by this time, Prince Eddie, remember him right from the beginning of the story, who was the subject of all this nonsense. He was by this time severely mentally ill because he'd undergone a complete mental breakdown when he found out what had happened to Annie, whom he still loved. And of course, he didn't know what had happened to his baby either. I mean, the guy wasn't very bright to start with. He was definitely below average intelligence, but he had a complete mental breakdown. So they actually sent him up to Scotland into the care of the Earl of Strathmore, who had a castle up there called Glamis Castle, which some people may have heard of. But they took him to Balmoral first, which is obviously the royal residence, and prior to being taken to Glamis, and the decision was made there to dispose of him for good. So Randolph Churchill, that lovely man who was Winston's father, and John Netley, the coach guy, they took him to the edge of a cliff. I mean, I didn't know this, but apparently there are lots of cliffs around Balmoral. But this is what happened. They took him to the edge of a cliff and chucked him off it, as you do. But somehow, and goodness knows how, he managed to survive, and he clung on to life. And 3 days later, believe it or not, he'd crawled all the way back to Balmoral. And so they decided this must be some kind of a sign that he wasn't meant to die. And so they decided then to revert back to plan A, which was incarcerating him at Glamis Castle in the care of the Earl of Strathmore. But nevertheless, a few years later, in 1892, Eddie's death was announced to the world. But it's known that he actually lived until 1933. But obviously, as they do, they were covering the whole thing up, and they didn't want him to be king. He would have become king after his father, because he was the oldest son. But they didn't want that to happen because of his mental state and all the rest of it. But this is coming on to a really interesting bit now. And as far as I know, I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, but as far as I know, this research is pretty unique to me. Okay. What happened was, as part of the deal for looking after Eddie for the rest of his natural life, the royal family agreed that one of Strathmore's daughters would be allowed to marry the heir to the throne and therefore become a queen. Okay. And this promise was actually fulfilled 30 years later when Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the daughter of the Earl of Strathmore, otherwise known as the Queen Mother, married the future King George VI.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly. Wow. Now, the strange thing about that is that she was actually, and again, this is not a lot of people know this, but it is a fact. She was actually married, engaged, or betrothed to the guy who would marry Mrs. Simpson, King Edward VIII, who was actually George VI's elder brother. But he didn't want anything to do with her. Not a thing. He detested the woman, and they both hated each other all their lives. And he rejected her. So I actually believe, and I might be going out on a really crazy limb here, but I actually believe that's why he was forced to abdicate. I don't think it was anything to do with him marrying a commoner, which is as it was presented, a divorced commoner. I think it was intended that he abdicate because of this promise to the Earl of Strathmore. They thought that she would marry Edward, but he didn't want her. He refused to have her. So he was forced to abdicate. I believe, I might be off beam here, but it makes sense, so that she could marry the new heir to the throne, or which was his younger brother, who became King George VI, the Queen's father. So that's how they fulfilled the promise, I believe. Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
It's fascinating.
it's fascinating, that, isn't it? And yeah, Then in 1973, the BBC made a really bizarre docudrama series that kind of tasked fictional TV detectives of the day with solving the Ripper mystery once and for all. Now, oddly, or maybe not, the BBC research team who were actually doing the research for these programs actually tracked down a retired Scotland Yard detective who put them in touch with a man by the name of Joseph Sickert. Now, if you remember at the beginning of this little tale, or this big tale, the art tutor to Prince Eddie was a guy by the name of Walter Sickert. Now, Joseph Sickert, still living in France, but he was Walter's son. And apparently, he had married Eddie's daughter. Does all that make sense? Have I lost everybody?
Yes, it does. I'm getting my head around this because it all begins to add up. It's like, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. We get little pieces of the picture, and as you put the jigsaw together, it makes one big picture, and we're getting most of the jigsaw pieces together now.
Absolutely.
It really is.
Absolutely. Now, Joseph Sickert actually appeared in the final program of this BBC series almost 50 years ago, and he told this story that I've just told you in all its gory detail, not all of it, but the basics of it. And this was accepted by the BBC as being the most likely solution of all. Well, how about that? Can you believe that?
Because there's been a lot of misdirections on it, saying it was a sailor, and was it German sailor, all this and the other. But what they can't actually answer is why they would why this this sailor would have had knowledge of surgical procedures. Yeah, because it was done by a surgeon. These murders,
exactly, and that was done by Sir William Gull.
What about all the blood that had been extinguished from the bodies?
Exactly.
And that doesn't answer the question there. Is a coincidence? Yes, perhaps. Yeah. But let's face it, there was murderers floating around London, because the East End especially is not so much now, but it was a very seedy place in those days. So there was all kinds of nasty pieces of work strolling around that sort of area, But this is fascinating. So let's recap. So we got Bose Lyon. Promise was that she would become queen, king, and Edward abdicated because of Mississippi. Because I know that there was a hell of a lot of the bad, the terrible stuff written about Mrs. Simpson.
Oh yeah,
saying that she was a man that had a sex change, and the other one was she was a prostitute. Horrendous stuff, which was totally untrue. Yeah. Because a friend of mine, his dad, was in the war, right? Where in the Bahamas during the war, he was RAF ground crew, and Mrs. Simpson and Edward were there. And he had nothing but praise for him. He said that Mrs. Simpson stood up for the underdog, and so did Edward. Yeah. And he'd come round, have a chat with him, and was quite one of the boys, sort of thing.
Well, as I say, Chris, I don't think that was the real reason for him being forced to abdicate at all. I think it was more to do with the promise to the Earl of Strathmore, the Queen Mother's father, that she would marry the man who would be king. That was the only way it was going to happen, because Edward refused flat out to do it because he hated her, and apparently she was a real bitch. She had this kind of aura of being a dear little old lady, didn't she? But she was a real nasty piece of work, apparently.
Oh, she was really unpleasant. There was a reason why she actually only hired gays, wasn't there, to be her servants?
Yeah. So if just let me. There's only about another.
Oh, please continue. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought we come. Yeah.
No, not at all. No.
Fascinating stories. So please continue, John. Yeah.
Right, and now we enter a guy by the name of Stephen Knight. Stephen Knight was a guy who wrote the book The Brotherhood.
I've got that book.
Yeah, and he was murdered because of it. He was poisoned, Stephen Knight. As that, that's the normal kind of, other than the Masonic rituals, that's the normal kind of punishment, poisoning for people who go against them. So Stephen Knight actually, before he wrote The Brotherhood, which obviously was his final book, because he wasn't around anymore to write anymore, he wrote a book called Jack the Ripper: The Final Solution. And he'd contacted Joseph Sicker as a result of this BBC TV program. And this book was the result of their meeting. But weirdly, Knight actually implicated Walter Sickert in the plot, which wasn't true at all. And as a result of this, Joseph then kind of went back on what he said and denied the whole thing. Not just his father's part in it, but the whole story, and said he'd made it up for publicity, which I find a little bit hard to swallow, to be honest. Why would he come forward and make up a story like that, and then not want, for publicity, and then not want to have anything to do with it when he achieved that publicity? It just doesn't make any logical sense at all. And
in the 80s, wasn't it? 70s or 80s? Because I know that I actually got the book in the early 80s, I believe.
Yeah, I've got it as well. It's a very good book. Very
excellent book. Yes,
very
I've still got
it. I don't know whether it's still in print or not, but anyway. So then, in another twist, okay, well, not really a twist, but another event in this story. In his final interview they ever gave, the Duke of Windsor, who'd been King Edward VIII and abdicated and married Mrs. Simpson, in his final interview before his death, he confessed that the Queen Mother had always been in love with him and not the Queen's father. And this was verbally backed
up. So who was this? I missed something there. Sorry, John. Could you?
The Duke of Windsor, King Edward VIII.
Oh, Duke of Windsor. Yes, I'm terrible.
The guy who abdicated. In his last interview before his death, he confessed that the Queen Mother had always been in love with him and not the Queen's father. And this was verbally backed up by the Duchess Wallis Simpson. And I know this for absolute certain because I've got the transcript of that interview. Okay. So I believe it was intended that they were introduced together with the specific aim of a royal arranged marriage between the two in order to fulfill that promise to Strathmore that we talked about. And then when she was rejected by him, because he was a notorious playboy and womanizer in his younger days.
I'll come onto that later.
Yeah. And so obviously he went against the wish of his family. So then it was decided that she'd have to settle for second best, his younger brother. And that's what happened. And that's why he was forced to abdicate, I believe. And it was the Queen Mother who actually fought tooth and nail to have them both disinherited by the royals, because she was an evil, jealous bitch, basically.
She was.
Scheming bitch. And she had them banished to France, and they were never allowed to return to England. I think Edward came back a couple of times, but they weren't allowed to live in England again. Yeah. So that's the intriguing bit of it. And, I'll just repeat this for the avoidance of doubt. Was Edward VIII forced into abdication deliberately by denying him the right to marry Wallis Simpson whilst he was still king, in order that decades-old promise could come to fruition? And so that Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the daughter of the Earl of Strathmore, could become queen. All in all, that's just about
isn't it?
It's a fascinating story.
Well, have you got? I mean, I guess you've got more to add. Would you like me to come in now about Edward VIII?
Please.
Well, many years ago, I knew a woman apparently Edward VIII, he was well liked amongst the working class.
Okay.
Because my father told me that what he used to do, and I don't know whether he got this in the newspapers, he probably did, because my father had a blind father, and he had to. That's why he was quite well up on what was going on, because in those days you did have newspapers that did have some degree of news in them before the war.
How old?
Not much, but there was some, and he used to read the newspapers to his father.
Right.
And he said to me that what Edward VIII did is, if there was a plane's route to go to a certain place, he'd say to the driver, turn left here, and he used to go round, not the places that were set out for the royals. He would see the real slums and the real East End. And I heard there was a woman that I knew who told me that her sister was a nurse in America in the 1930s. She was the youngest of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And Edward VIII was always down the East End and used to go into the local pubs there. And he used to speak with the working class, and they used to, I think it was almost on first name terms. And he spent a bit of time with the naughty ladies there, shall we say. And he caught a dose of something that you don't talk about in polite company. And he went to America, where he was treated, and the nurse that was in the private hospital where he was treated was this woman's sister. And she was actually very nervous about telling me, because her sister was sworn to secrecy. And she's not the type of woman to, and she said, oh, I don't know whether I should tell you this. And she was very, very nervous, even then, and I'm going back about, 20, 30 years. She told me this. She was really, don't tell anybody else and all this. Well, I think I can now because she's pretty safe. But that's the story I heard, that he caught something nasty, and that was it, But that's an absolutely intriguing story. That really is.
Yeah.
So
I don't take total credit for it. I mean, I've used a lot of other people's research as well, but there is a lot of stuff in there that's unique to me as well.
Well, have you got any more to add, or would you like to go straight into chat again?
We're going to chat now. I mean, that's basically it, really. I mean, we can talk around it now if you want.
It's one of these. What you've spent tonight, I think when we switch off this program tonight, we'll all be thinking about this and thinking, hang on, it really does add up, doesn't it? It really does. Yeah. Right, now, I don't know, there's so much in chat, I'm terribly sorry, I might have to leave a few of you out. I don't think I'm rude. Now it says here, right, Fushi, if I got his name, I can never pronounce his name. But Fauci, that's it. Fauci was part of the NIH cable that were pushing the deadly, AZT on HIV positive victims. The AZT killed them, not the HIV.
Correct, John. That's completely spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. We got here. We got Emmons says, John Bazinglon, I agree, and too many poppers. I don't think HIV even exists.
No, I agree.
I don't know much about it. Louise, so they sold their souls, hello Louise, to the devil, and their daughters to the highest bidder. Yes, that's quite. Yeah. And also, what I'd like to add there actually is, did you know that the Queen Mothers, I'm not sure if it's her gynecologist, or I think it was a gynecologist or doctor. This was actually on the BBC many years ago, and I'm talking about the 1990s. I think it was a documentary, because they were questioning. No, it must have been the 1980s rather, who the Queen's father really was, because the doctor said, they're talking about Bose Lyon now. Yeah. She gave birth by some means. So no, we got her to give birth by some means or other, which is a very strange thing to put in a diary. By some means or other, little bit vague. And they reckon, I don't know, but some people say that Churchill was the Queen's and Margaret's father, but I think Churchill was so drunk he couldn't even raise a smile. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'd heard that.
Yeah, I don't. We'll never know. Now we got here, Pimlico Fox. Wow, would never have thought to look up Balmoral. Just one those names you hear in the news as a newbie to the red pill, but it looks stunning and definitely lots of cliffs. Yes, and it's Balmoral.
Yeah. Very good, Sean.
He's got an S here. I think he might have made a spelling mistake there. There we go. Then we got here. Try Pimlico Fox, laugh aloud. Try saying that after a few whiskies. Yes. Then we've got here John Bassingloan. Yes, Eamon. In the 1990s, there was a doctor who held the same beliefs. He would even allow HIV positive patients' blood to mix with his blood. He did lectures and condemned Fauci. I can never pronounce it. Fauci. I'll get it right one day. I'll have to have Fauci training for his quackery. Well, he's a blooming quack, that bloke. Now we got what we got here. We've got Eamon, John Bassingloan. Yes, Robert Wilder. He conveniently died of a heart attack. Yes, they always have convenient heart attacks, don't they? A year or two later, there were lots of people saying the same thing. The channel questioning everything is good on that, right? Okay.
If anyone wants to research AIDS and HIV, watch the documentary. I think it's on. Well, it might have been taken off YouTube now, but it was on YouTube for a long time. But it could be on one of the other video platforms called House of Numbers. It absolutely nails it. I mean, it just tells you like it is that HIV and AIDS and AIDS doesn't exist at all. It's just a collection of symptoms that they've created a disease from, basically. And HIV, I don't know whether it exists or not, but even if it does, it certainly doesn't cause AIDS. That's for sure.
Well, that was quite a thing in the 80s, wasn't it? I remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's people in a swimming pool and they're all diving out because someone was supposed to have had AIDS jumped in. Anyway, John Bassingloan, search for. We don't hear
about it now, do we?
This is Eamon. He's replying to John Bassingloan. Search for Stefan Lanka. He's currently conducting a study that will totally disprove virus. I won't say it out loud. Theory. He's lucky he didn't come from the East End. Yeah. Right. And it says here, this is Angela. Hello, Angela. So interesting. My history class for the week. That's nice. And then we got here. Oh, that's very kind, DJ. Thank you very much. Great stuff, chaps. And then we've got here DJ V2 surrogacy. Yes. And then we've got here a test. I won't say the name. This is Louise. Was designed to test for HIV. That's why the maker knew if you magnified it enough, every result would be positive. Strange how he died shortly before this latest health scare.
It was actually just into it, Louise, because he actually made that statement to Fauci, and then 2 days later he was dead. 2 weeks later, I think he was dead.
Yeah. Well, because they've already got, they've got a heart attack gun that can give people a heart attack. Angela Davis says the Queen looks too much like Queen Mary to be the Churchills. Yes, you have a point. I mean, we'll never know. I mean, as I say, I think Churchill was too drunk to when the Queen was born. Sean Hamer, no, it wasn't. It was designed to monitor cancer treatments. That's the PCR test, I assume. And then we've got
I don't know that.
DJ B2. It's like the guy who invented. Yes, that's right, the PCR test.
Yeah.
And then we've got John Bassingloan. I will research Stefan Lanka. Wasn't he the German virologist who offered a $1,000 award to anyone who produced a written peer review thesis that could refute his position? Don't know.
That sounds familiar, John. Yeah.
Louise is correct. That's right. And the last one is Eamon. That was my joke about rhyming slang and Dr. Stefan Lanka's name. Yes, rhyming slang. A bit of Cockney rhyming slang there, yes. Dr. Stefan Lanka, yes. A bit like J. Arthur Rank. I thought I had, that's the film people I'm talking about, of course. I thought I had to make it before you did. His research is brilliant, though. So I know all about I know quite a bit about rubbing slang, coming from down south. Sean Hamer, if it was designed to test for HIV, why did the inventor say AIDS was a scam? Don't know. Interesting
Because
point.
HIV and AIDS are two separate things. HIV is the virus that is, well, the alleged virus that is supposed to lead to AIDS, but the whole science behind that particular, the whole logic of the science behind that is just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense at all.
But it says here, Louise Wilcox says, "Thanks, DJ. I didn't know it. I don't. If I don't, sorry. Thanks, DJ. If I don't know it, I don't say it. Okay." And then we've got here, Pimlico Fox. Well, I have took a HIV test. It was negative, and hope it stays that way. Oh well.
Don't worry, you won't get AIDS, Pimlico.
No, but
Not
well,
from that. We won't get it from
really...
anything. That's because it doesn't bloody well exist, does it?
Well, do you remember that? Think what we've had. I was talking to a lady in the supermarket the other day. So I often go around chatting up ladies in the supermarket.
As you do, yeah.
She said, I said, she had the old mask and she was quite, she said, "Oh, you haven't got a," So I said, "No, I don't wear one." And I said, but she was quite a pleasant sort of person. And I said, "Do you think we've lived lives of scares?" And she reminded me of a few other scares. That was mad cow disease, Edwina Curry with the eggs.
Yeah.
We've all forgotten about that. All scares, worry, all the time.
Foot and mouth disease, the big foot and mouth disease about 20 years ago, that big thing.
What was that, sorry?
Foot and mouth disease,
foot and mouth, yes. That was
slaughtered thousands of cows and horses, hundreds of thousands of them.
And they knew before it came about, didn't they? They had everything ready.
Yeah.
Because it was to destroy the countryside. Because you couldn't walk in the countryside, could you? If I remember rightly, some places were off limits.
Yeah.
But I know that in the first foot and mouth disease, which was in 1967, and I know that date because my uncle owned a butcher's shop. Yeah, not exactly good timing, was it? And a farmer found that if he had a barn full of onions cut in half, none of his cattle went down with anything. Didn't go down with foot and mouth disease at all, because the onions absorbed anything, and that was an old farmer's tale, which they did in the old days, apparently. Stop it. So that's it. Right. Well, I think, have you any more to add, John?
No, not specifically about that story, but I mean, I'll just say that it's so typical of the way that history is falsified, fabricated. They just make things up to cover their own wrongdoings. That's what the whole of history is about. It's about certain events that have taken place in a certain way, but the way that we get told it is completely different to protect the guilty.
Yeah. Well, let's face it, history isn't what happened. It's what a minority of people want you to believe.
Exactly.
That's really what history is.
Yeah.
And what gets me is the government is lying all the time and people believe them. That's how gullible people really are. That's what I find so terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of syndrome, Stockholm syndrome, that people have, where they're kind of, mesmerised by what they say. I mean,
it's to be fair to them, to be fair to the masses who fall for this hook, line and sinker, they are being deliberately manipulated. Then it's not like they're just stupid and take it on board. The people who do this are masters of the human psyche, and they spend many millions every year on, manipulating us with things like NLP, neuro linguistic programming techniques, which is what's been happening with what is going on in the world today. All the coloured signs that you see and the 3 slogans that change periodically, that is a form of NLP, and it actually programs people. It actually mass hypnotizes people. I know it sounds really weird to say that, but it does. And people actually begin to believe everything through techniques like that they are masters at.
Well, they are. I mean, look at the white feather campaign in the First World War, where women will give someone a white feather if they thought they were avoiding going to the front.
Exactly.
And in the Second World War,
a real big
friend,
stigma, wasn't it?
well, Colin, who's sometimes does the mystery hour, his father was in the Merchant Navy and was on the Atlantic convoys where they were being torpedoed and whatever. And he saw a lot of other war action all around the world. And because he had civilian clothes, people were sometimes offensive to him, thinking, "Oh, you're avoiding the ocean." Poor sod had just been across the Atlantic, you know. So it's surprising how people are programmed to believe certain things. But I'm going to say we have a program coming up. I won't mention too much, shall we, John? We might have a third guest on next week.
Yes.
We're going to try and get a third guest.
We will have a third guest. It's just that it might not be in video, perhaps.
Yeah, that's right. From over the pond, from America. You've got an American third guest, and there may be another program as well with another guest. But you'll have to stay tuned to find out who that is. And we're hoping to do a program about our books, how they were written, how John got to write his books, and how my father got to write his book, because that's a story in its own.
Yeah,
both sides.
And believe me, everyone out there, I've just been reading Chris's dad's book, and it is absolutely fascinating. It's a superb historical document that needs preserving for posterity, in my view. Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, that's very moving. Thank you very much. And John has kindly sent me, was it Behind the Curtain? And you can't put it down. Because I was reading it the other night. It's fantastic. I was reading away and I thought, it's about 9 o'clock. I think I'll put my electric blanket on before I go to bed. And it was 11 o'clock. Time just goes. It's really well written. And please go on to John's website, which I've got here. Well, it's actually below. I've actually put this below here. But I'll put a banner up. Where are we? I've lost it. Where are we? We got... come on. Here it is, the falsification of history.co.uk. And if you want to contact John, that's his Gmail number, which you can find on his thingy-bob.
It is on the website, but
on the website. And if you want to find out about my dad's book, if you go on to fockhamhallradio.com rather, or you can go on to warveteran.co.uk and find out all about his book. So, and thank you very much for that plug, John. It's much appreciated.
You're very welcome.
You a good plug. And we'll see you all back here next week, same time, with a third guest from America. So exciting. Thank you very much for joining us, John. Thank you very much for everybody that in chat for your help. Without you, this program wouldn't be what it is. So thank you, everybody in chat and everybody that comments as well. It's all very much appreciated. And it really restores your faith in human nature, because we've got some really great people. And I'm terribly sorry if I haven't read any, all your comments out, but you can read them after
there were so many tonight. Many more than usual, weren't there? So
there is.
Yeah. And so thanks to everybody for tuning in anyway. I really appreciate your patronage, and I look forward to next week when the next show will be same time, same channel.
Same time, that's right. Thank you very much, and good night. And remember, have a laugh. Keep smiling.